Hey there! Welcome to my highly anticipated yet entirely overdue video tutorial using Daylon Leveler to create height maps for games like MX Spikes and Reflex. Before we get started, as a brief overview, we will be going over how to start a project using most of the tools, using both Leveler and Photoshop and/or GIMP. And as a small disclaimer, I don't know everything there is to do with Daylon Leveler. I'm not going to pretend that I know everything, but what I will show you is the tools and techniques that I've learned along the way to make height maps for these games. So let's get started. When you first open up Daylon Leveler, you'll be presented with a Leveler tips box. This is a great way to learn small bits of information, to optimize Leveler, as well as learn about things that you didn't know were available. If you don't want to see this, uncheck Show Tips when starting. I'm going to click OK and make this full scale. Now there are two different ways to start a project in Daylon Leveler. So one way is to import, and the other is to just start a fresh new height map. I'll go over both of those, and then I'll show you how to set up our scaling. So first, import, file, import, and then I've got something set up already. We've got Fort Red. This doesn't matter too much right now. We'll just do 0 and 12. Click OK. And then this is the important part. We want to scale this up so that it's our whole thing. Click in, and now we have our map. But as you can see, things look flat. It'll change once we set up our scaling. So next, I'll show you how to do a new height map from scratch. So this is the resolution of our document, and we're going to do 2048. And for MX Bikes, we need to add the +1. For Reflex, you don't have to do that, and the coordinate system for Reflex can also be raster. It doesn't have to be local. It has to be local for us to set up our horizontal scaling for MX Bikes. Okay. Now we are going to go through how to set up our ground extents and elevation mapping required for MX Bikes to get our horizontal scales. So we will go to Navigate, Ground Extents, choose meters if it's not selected. We'll do east and do south. For this, we'll do 450, and then to simplify it, I just copy pasta over. Okay, and then because we have no elevation, it's just 0, that's all we have here. So this doesn't matter for this purpose. Where it will matter is here. So for Fort Red or Fort Dodge, we will go to our coordinate system first, because when we import a height map, it automatically uses the raster coordinate system. So we'll click local. That will now give us ground extents, and do the same thing, and then you do your own scaling. This was 250 by 250 meters. Okay, nothing happened. Why? Well, because we have to set our elevation mapping. So we're going to go to meters, and I've already set some of this stuff up in here, but it was 12 meters. And ta-da, we have height. Now that we have our scaling set, let's look at how to move around in Daylon Leveler. So I first like to start off by changing the size of the windows. So we've got our 2D and our 3D views. By default, the camera tool is selected. Right now it looks like a black box. That's just the recording, but I have the camera tool selected. To cycle through them, you're going to use the spacebar. So we've got our zoom and then our pan tool. Those are the first three by default, and then if you use a brush or an additional tool, it will be in your cycle. So if we zoom in, I'm using my middle mouse wheel to zoom in. And then if we left click, we can rotate in our 3D view, and wherever you click is where it will kind of rotate around. Additionally, we've got our pan tool, where this moves us up and down, left and right, or right and left rather. And if we want to, what I often end up doing is clicking the middle mouse wheel, which gives us our pan tool. So as you work, you'll find that you kind of use these muscle memories here. Left click, pan tool, and then zoom in and out. Now, before I show you the tools and brushes, I want to show you some settings and the settings I use, as well as to add an overlay texture. So first, let's look at changing our default scene appearance. So as you notice, I have a gray background. You probably have a sky blue background. And to change that as your default to something like this, may be more pleasing, we're going to go to File and Preferences and Default Scene Appearance. In here, we'll go to this little window here. These all have different settings, and this is static, this is while navigating, and while editing, as it suggests. But I don't change too much here as far as stuff, but we will, for the purpose of this video, we will actually change and add our main draping texture and use 50% opacity. Then we'll change this. This is where you would change your background color. Once you set it to whatever color you want, you can do add custom colors and it will add it. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. Remember, we're going to do the draping texture. This will come in handy later on. And then our colors, see, it's already added. I've already added it, but and then this here, and change the color. Yep. Okay. Next, let's look at our default map scene appearance. And here, which is this window over here, our default map scene appearance, we want to tick brush reticle so that we can actually see the size of our brush. And then we're going to tick use 50% opacity. This is where you can set whatever opacity you want for this overlay texture. We can start off at 50%. And then this is also where you can change the background texture for this view as well. I have it set to the same dark gray. And then we'll click OK. And then for future projects, it should load with these settings in mind. Next, we're going to go to Preferences and General. Now, I haven't changed too much with general preferences. I have added a few keyboard shortcuts, and here you just add whatever tool it is that you want to add, and then you add your key that you want to use. Another thing that's very helpful in here is the right mouse button reverses dig/raise tool behavior. This means that when you use the dig tool, you can left click for whatever it's originally meant for, whether it's dig or the raise tool. And then if you right click, it will reverse whatever the action is. So it can be super helpful. That way you don't have to keep switching between the dig tool or the raise tool. And I don't change anything here. File handling, if you want it to save every so many edits, you can set it up here. I just manually save after so many myself, and that's all it. Yeah. Then we have our advanced settings, and this is where you can set up some different stuff as far as memory and undo. I haven't had to mess with any of this part here. Even rendering and color haven't had to do anything. I don't think I have changed anything with my undo buffer limit, but if you want to lower it or raise it, you can do that. And if you want to limit the application, you can do that here as well. Another helpful tip is that once you do so many edits, you can go to edit and then clear undo buffer. That way, when you undo something, it will be faster than, taking up so much time. Also, another setting that we can go over is our tools. So we'll go through brush tools, and here we can set the minimum brush size to whatever we want it to be. The only one that I've changed is our blur tool, because I like to have a bigger brush when I use that tool usually. And click OK. Now let's look at the tools and brushes we have available, but mostly just the ones I use. So here is the dig tool. We've got it selected. We can change our brush size here, or we can change it up here. Then we can change the strength of our brush up here as well. So by default, I think it's 0.5. And when you make a change up here, you need to click in one of the other boxes. That goes the same for your elevations. So if we left click, you'll see we dig. And if we right click, we raise. Because what we did earlier when we checked the behavior for the dig and raise tool. This is pretty helpful and makes things a little bit more efficient than having to keep clicking between the dig and the raise tool. Now let's take a look at the eyedropper tool. So if we click the eyedropper tool and we left click, we'll get a height value in the left side of our elevations. And if we right click, we'll get a height value in our right side. This is helpful when you're making your sections, getting heights from, say, the bottom of here all the way up to the top of this. You'll use it quite a bit. Now looking at the flatten tool, we can left click and nothing happens because this is the height of this right here. But if we right click, we get the height value on the right side. And as a bonus, if we use the marquee tool, or anytime we're using it, whatever the selection is, if we Control X, it will flatten to whatever is in the right side here. So if we do this and we change, so it's to this height value, and we Control X, now we have flattened it to the original height. Now let's take a look at the blur tool. This is pretty self-explanatory. If you've used Photoshop or GIMP, you know that this just blurs whatever you're painting over. In this instance, we don't have a strength for the blur tool, so it's just what it is out of the box. So I'm going to edit in the 2D view and then show that you can also edit in the 3D view. Pretty much any brush you can edit in 3D or 2D. It's just kind of whatever seems to work for your particular situation. And then if we grab our smudge tool, by default it's 75. I've lowered it, or my bad, by default it's 95. I've lowered it to 75 here. And this can kind of help you with drawing out maybe like a rut or erosion on the side of a jump. Now that we've made a bunch of edits, let's look at how we can undo our actions. So we can come up here and undo, or we can Control Z, undo, and we can also speed up the process a little bit by going to Edit, Regress to, and choose wherever we want to go back to. I'm going to go back before we blurred this jump over here. And we're done. Now let's take a look at the different selections we can make in our project. So if we go over here, we've got the rectangle select. I've got it to constrain to a square, but if you need something that's more custom, like a rectangle in this instance, making a whoop section, this is how you would do it. And in the left bottom corner of the program, we can see how big of a selection we're making. So if we need to have a selection be a certain track width, this is where we could decide. Next we have the circle or elliptical, and we can make a circle selection. If we want to constrain it, we can go over here to circle, left click, and we've got a perfect circle. Then we can do arbitrary, which just kind of lets you paint wherever, and that's how you use that one. And then we've got our polygon select tool, where it kind of works in the ways that maybe like a pen tool would work, except you can't adjust the points that you click. Something else that we need to go over when it comes to selections is that when you make a selection, and if you want to take away from it, you will control click and it will remove the selection. But if you want to add to a selection, it's shift and then click, and control D to deselect. We can also brush select by just kind of painting. It doesn't hold the reticle while you're painting, so it's kind of difficult to see what you're doing. That's why I like using these other tools, because you can see where you're going to add to your selection. Now, one of the most important functions when it comes to selections is our ability to take a selection and move it in our project. So with our selection made, we're going to click and drag. And now we've moved it, but we don't see it here yet. And that's because we need to defloat our selection. And it gives us a couple of different ways that we can apply it to our height map. We're going to choose replace for this tutorial. And now we have our height map added, or our selection added to a different location. Finally, there is selection options as well. So if we look just under float, choose selection options, we can flatten the tool to the tool's flatten elevation. And so whatever our lowest number is, that's what it's going to flatten it to. So when we click OK, now it moves it. And so now we don't have to try and erase or flatten out a section, we just move it. And this is pretty good for Supercross, where your base is pretty much all the same on track. So you can kind of move stuff around. So we'll hit replace. And then what it might look like if we do an add, it's just adding to whatever your selection is. So if I just move it a little bit, maybe make it so it's kind of in between, we will defloat and add to our selection. So it just adds additional height and or applies it on top of a selection. We can also click this button here for moving our selection, and now it lets us move our selected without affecting our height map. Now let's take a look at the texture auto selection feature. So this one here with the kind of rectangle around the magic wand tool, we'll click that so that we have it active, and then we need to go over to our fresh project, and we're going to select our overlay image. So here is where you pick that. I have a PNG, so I've already done this, but you'll add it here for your track overlay image. If you use your track mask, which has an alpha, it will just display the alpha, which would just be your track path. And then next, to display the overlay, we have to check on this checker pattern up here. And when we made the default scene and map appearance changes, it only does that when you start the project over or reopen it. So what you'll probably have to do is go up here to the scene appearance, or we can go to, yeah, that's actually it. We have to go to our scene appearance and make those changes again, where we're adding the draping texture, using the opacity while navigating, and normal. Same goes for the map 2D plane here. Right click, map appearance, and then texture, use opacity 50% or whatever percent you want. But then the cool thing here is that the texture auto select, if we click in the track path, it selects just the track path. So pretty handy when it comes to wanting just your track path to be selected, or to not affect the track path and affect only the surrounding area. So if we Control plus I, we've now inverted our selection and only affecting what's outside of it. Now let's look at our ramp tool. First, make a selection, then click our ramp tool. Here we have some settings to go over. Elevations left to right decide the gradient direction, meaning that left side is our start and right side is our end. Then we have our ramp. We have linear or radial to choose from. Our style, sharp, smooth, convex, or concave. And then the way in which we will draw on the height map. Usually it's replace, add, or subtract. When it comes to elevations, in order to make an edit save, we need to do one of two things. When we click in edit, we need to either click in the other box so that this side saves, or click this reverse button twice. For the video, I will just demonstrate the general technique, but you will want to spend more time tweaking things here. So building a jump face, we will choose concave and add, because we are going to add to this flat height map. We'll zoom in here a little bit, and then you'll click and drag. In order to get it to be straight, you'll click, drag, and hold shift. And then there are two ways to get the back side of a jump face. We can either add a negative to this, or we can go over here, choose convex, and subtract to get our backside. So I'll just quickly demonstrate both techniques. Now for landings, we will choose the smooth style, and we will add. Again, click, shift, and then just subtract. And we've got a landing. This now concludes part 1 of this video series. To recap, we went over getting started, scaling our project, navigation, settings and preferences, as well as the tools and brushes we have to use in Leveler. In the next part, we will go over the different filters and the ways that we can use them for creating and editing height maps.